Hello, everyone. Today, this is André Fauteux of 21st Century Housing, La Maison du 21e siècle magazine based in Quebec. And on February 15, 2022, I'm very happy to have Lisa Nagy with us online again, directly from Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
So thank you for being there today. The first time we had very poor quality reception with my satellite dish, and now we have fiber optics, so we should be good to talk about radio frequency irradiation and neurological impacts. You are an environmental physician.
I'm going to turn off my air filter so you don't have noise in the background. Hold on one sec.
So Lisa is specialized in treating people with environmental illness. She became very ill herself and was treated in Dallas by Dr. William J. Ray, who unfortunately passed away and taught me a lot also. Lisa, I was asked to write a chapter on radio frequency radiation and learning disabilities. Have you seen that a lot in your patients and perhaps yourself? Is it true that neurological symptoms are the first symptoms of electrosmog from low and high frequency radiation?
Well, one of the first things I would say is yes, and there's so many different things that are neurologic that aren't learning related, that are just, seizures and
what are the
Parkinson's.
Main symptoms? One becomes intolerant to electromagnetic waves. What are the first symptoms or the most common?
Well, the phone heating up in your hand. So the main thing people do is they for some reason don't notice the phone is hot until they become electrosensitive, and if they hold it to their head or they put some sort of an earbud in, it'll heat up in the ear. And I don't know I think of it as the patient's cells become so sick that they become more sensitive to things that they weren't sensitive to before. And usually we talk about the membrane damage to the voltage-gated calcium channel. That may be the mechanism of this. And it's also the mechanism.
If we could just explain that to people, it'll open up the cell and it becomes flooded with calcium. Why is that?
So calcium is bad for cells. And when you have the channelopathies, there are genetic reasons why people will have abnormal sodium channels, potassium channels, or calcium channels. There are, I think, 4 types of calcium channels, and one of them is called a voltage-gated calcium channel, and they're different types, So, yeah, if we knew experts in this area of physiology, it would be helpful, because I'm not an expert in channelopathies. All I know is that Martin Paul has written papers on this. I just don't see a lot of clinical evidence that we can say this patient is sick, this patient's calcium channels are doing this, and if we give such and such a treatment, it fixes it.
But we've seen a lot of studies about the blood-brain barrier opening up, and so the blood-gut barrier opening up when the pollutants, chemical or electrical pollutants.
Right. Well, the fascinating thing is that Wi-Fi, let's say you have a high school. We have a high school here at an elementary school that are being rebuilt because they're moldy and they are old and dilapidated and have had roof leaks. So what I'm seeing here is the combined effect of Wi-Fi and maybe mold in buildings on Martha's Vineyard, which is like the moldiest place on earth. Coincidentally, I'm here. And they both work through maybe the same mechanism of the voltage-gated calcium channel. And if you've got one problem, you get a certain amount of illness or children that have impairment. And if you have more than one problem, it's worse. And if their home is moldy, it's even worse. So if you have a mold-exposed society, and then maybe people have routers at home with Wi-Fi, or off island, meaning not on Martha's Vineyard, they have smart meter applied to their home, then the person will tip over very quickly and get headaches or confusion or inability to read. So I'm going to go into that for a second.
Tell me, why is Martha's Vineyard the moldiest place on earth?
Why? Because it's moist and there's foliage. We're in the ocean, but we're not very sandy. So there's a lot of mold in the ambient air outside because we have woods leaves and degrading trees. So a lot of the houses here are summer houses and weren't insulated. They're called a camp, C-A-M-P. So people who live in the winter in a house that was really not designed that way, they end up kind of retrofitting and doing a little bit of insulation, maybe a heating system that's inadequate, and they're on a crawl space and they don't seal the crawl space and keep it dry and seal it with plastic so that they have this mold fest under their home, rotting the wood potentially and leading to mold and mycotoxins being produced and being sucked into the living space. So that's one issue. And then people have water intrusion and they don't do a French drain around the house to prevent the water from leaching in through the walls. They don't think it's important. It's like commonplace. Oh, everybody's got mold. And a lot of men say everybody's got mold issues. Well, it doesn't mean that everybody isn't sick from it. It means that it's an ignored factor in health in certain communities. And even places like Los Angeles have major mold problems because the houses are kind of made out of paper. They're very flimsy. They're not brick. And then they have crawl space. They don't have basements because of the earthquakes. And then if people have a water leak, like the dishwasher or roof, and they don't take it seriously, the house being made of pulp or paper or drywall or some material that is food for mold, then you get still a problem, even though it's a hot, dry climate. And so it doesn't always mean that you have to be in a moist environment, right? To have, Texas is very bad for mold exposed, moldy homes. Yeah. Houston's very humid, and, there are various regions in the country with different issues in terms of the construction of the basement. But I'd like to just go back for a minute in terms of learning. What happened when I was sick, I got very confused. I was in a house with a mold problem and I didn't know it had a mold problem from a big aquarium from a Walt Disney movie called Flight of the Navigator. And the doctor who sold me the house put the aquarium in the wall of the living room and covered it up with a little wood shed, the aquarium shed, which covered up the air intake for the house. So the air supposedly fresh air coming into the house was actually coming from the aquarium shed. So the mold and mycotoxins were produced in the shed, and the shed smelled like a fish aquarium, but it didn't smell moldy necessarily. And then the house, I never noticed it smelled bad, but now having moved.
Was it just from condensation or a leak from the aquarium?
No, because there was 5,000 gallons of water in the aquarium.
In a small shed.
And the shed is wood, it wasn't sealed. So wood plus water led to a fine mold growth, probably on the walls, that was imperceptible. Wow. I didn't notice it. But the doctor who sold me the house was mentally ill and anxious and kind of struggling and abnormal. And then we bought the house and went downhill as well. And then I had a leak, something leaked. I spilled some water, a bucket of water, under a hemp rug. And that rug, when I rolled it back and had to throw it away, was black with Stachybotrys. So it meant that the Stachybotrys was in the air. It was growing in my toothbrush holder. It was growing in the soap dish, but it wasn't the soap dish that was the problem or the rug that was the problem. It was the initial aquarium that probably poisoned the air.
It's important to explain that Stachybotrys atra or chartrum is perhaps the deadliest mold on Earth.
Right.
Which seems to have killed a lot of babies in Cleveland many years ago.
I'm from Cleveland too, so I know all about that.
Ah.
Yeah.
Well, I have so much fun talking to you and other environmental physicians because we're talking building science. I was trained by CMHC engineers, rocket scientists, and you're talking the same lingo.
Well, and the thing is, I was a physician, so it didn't dawn on me any of these things. And we're not taught this in medical school. I went to Cornell for medical school, and I went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, undergrad. And the main problem is that nobody really lets people in on the secret. And they think the physician thinks that the woman is crazy and hysterical when they have these symptoms, and they refer them to psychiatry. And so, excuse me, I'm just having a little sip of my coffee. So
you say you had confusion. What other neurological symptoms?
Well, I was very fatigued. I would sit around in a bathrobe, and I was so bad the medical society came to examine me and see if I was a candidate for financial assistance because I couldn't pay my mortgage. I was unable to work, but I thought it was like I must be depressed. I didn't know I had a physical problem. And they took one look at me and handed me a check for $10,000. So the medical society has a lot of money, I guess, but I said, oh no, I'm not deserving of this. And they said, you are more deserving than anybody we've ever met. Wow. So that helped me. And then I sold the house and then I went to a rental and I was then aware there was a meeting on chemical sensitivity in Washington, D.C. I went by myself to that meeting, met Dr. Ray, flew to Dallas and followed him.
What year
and got
was
treated
this?
for 3 months.
What year?
2000 and I want to say 2003. Yeah. So I became sick in 2000, maybe applied for disability in 2003 at the beginning, then getting retroactive money because I finally realized I wasn't well. And what I had was adrenal insufficiency, low cortisol, and that helped a lot when that was replaced, but it didn't fix everything. And I had POTS, postural tachycardia, which is extremely common, both of these, in most of these mold and EMF sensitive patients. So when somebody has,
say that slowly, POTS is an acronym, P-O-T-S.
Oh yeah, so this is extremely important.
Post.
POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and it is not usually associated with low blood pressure, right? In my case, my patients now usually have normal blood pressure on standing, and they just have a fast heartbeat. And then what happens is they keep standing and they release adrenaline because it's stressful, and they end up having a surge of the blood pressure. So if you keep taking the blood pressure, it goes up.
When they stand up.
Yep. And then this rise in blood pressure can make you anxious. And the tachycardia can make you anxious even if the blood pressure is normal. And they don't feel well. They feel like crossing their arms like this. People who fold their arms automatically, you think POTS. People who pretzel their legs when they're sitting at the computer, think POTS. The EMF from the computer, when a patient has POTS, will make them cross their legs on the computer. Then,
why does that help, crossing arms and legs?
Because it sends the blood from the lower extremity back up to the head. And then the patient can think. So the main thing is that people want to be able to think and function and have cerebral blood flow. So if they don't, they want to lie down. They get tired, they want to lay down. And you have to determine who has POTS.
That's interesting. I must say, you met Dr. Dominique Belpomme, who's an oncologist from France. Mm-hmm. He invited me to Brussels for his first Paris appeal EMF conference in 2015. And he introduced me to this chap from Immunocow, IMMUNAGE.fr is the website. That's where I buy the fermented papaya preparation, which is given to cancer patients, people with AIDS, and people with electromagnetic sensitivity. Because what it does is that it increases blood flow to the head. And he took scans of his patients, and that's one of the problems that he diagnosed is a lot of people don't get enough blood, i.e. oxygen, to the brain.
Yeah, well, that's why you would have thinking trouble. There are many factors that are employed, but the main study that may or may not be associated with people with POTS is Journal of Cerebral Blood Flow. And it's like, I want to say 13 years ago. And in that is an article on cell phones. And the holding up of the cell phone to the head decreases blood flow to the brain on PET scan. I don't think anybody knows about it. I found it to be the best study, but I've been quoting it for 13 years. So
I know about it because you sent it to me last week.
Oh, okay, good. So, you know, there are many factors at play, but not every factor in every patient. Yep. This is not that complicated. I'm not that brilliant. You know, I'm just sort of putting together pieces of the puzzle in each individual person. But yep. If they have postural tachycardia, the treatment is compression socks and salt and water. You know, you increase the volume and you put the compression socks on and they push the blood up. But now Lululemon pants go all the way up to the belly. So instead of wearing thigh highs or pantyhose or whatever, you can do Lululemon pants, which may only have 15 millimeters of pressure, I'm guessing, not 30, but it's better than nothing. And then the other way to do it is to wear stronger compression socks or pantyhose and an abdominal binder. And you can crank it as tight as you want. This keeps the blood not only out of the legs, but out of the gut. And when people eat food and they have POTS, they pool blood in the abdomen because you're digesting, and that makes them tired and want to go to sleep. Or I got chilly and needed a sweater. And you obviously can't think, right? They feel like not working. So people will starve themselves all day because they are not functional when they eat a large meal. Then they'll eat a big meal at the end of the day and go to bed. And they don't, and they're always.
Sounds like my sister-in-law.
Yeah. So you're going to find people when I describe, I feel like the thing that I am useful for is explaining common symptoms. And then you can see it in everybody who has it. And you can see, well, this person has low adrenal function and this person has POTS.
Would hemorrhoids be linked to that?
Well, hemorrhoids are more, there are 4 areas when you get liver cirrhosis, right? You know, you get dilatation of veins, inferior epigastrics. I'm trying to remember hemorrhoids, you know, you get pressure increase in the venous system and the portal venous system. Hemorrhoids can just be from pushing because you're constipated, right? Or it can be that your liver's having major problems and you have cirrhosis. So hemorrhoids wouldn't be like dilated veins from POTS unless you've got POTS and hemorrhoids. And I don't see that symptom of hemorrhoids in all my POTS patients. But then, you know, maybe I'm not always asking, by the way, but I do a rectal exam on most patients and don't see hemorrhoids on any of them.
Okay.
Okay.
For sure, sitting down all day at the computer really doesn't help. Let's get back to kids. Have you had patients, children or adults who had severe learning disabilities that were improved notably by reducing EMF exposure?
Well, the main thing, if you think of it this way, okay, so you have the blood-brain barrier leakage, you have maybe a change in neurotransmitters, which maybe I have no idea if that's been proven. And the blood flow issue is the main one. So you got to fix that first. And it really only takes 2 days. And I didn't really get to finish the treatment. So I'll just.
It takes 2 days with the socks, and what else?
Well, yeah. So midodrine, MIDODRINE, it comes in different strengths, and 10 milligram tablet is the largest. And it's really easy to treat. For physicians watching this, you start with 2.5 milligrams, 1 dose, and they should get goosebumps of the scalp. And it's like an itch, and you feel like a really good scratch. It feels really good and tingly, and they can get a chill throughout the body and goosebumps. That's normal. And you adapt after a couple of doses and the symptoms are milder, but you don't want to be too itchy. And then what you do is you determine if they need 2.5, 5, 7.5, or 10. Within 2 days, you figure out their dose. They take it every 4 hours.
Only for 2 days.
And then they stay on it for the rest of their life.
Okay.
Yeah.
And daily. Okay.
And then if they get better, they don't need it anymore. And I'll maybe finish that. You could ask me the final treatment, but this is just a Band-Aid to get rid of the symptoms.
Yeah.
Midodrine is a vasoconstrictor, and the other treatment is Florinef, which is a hormone that holds on to salt and water.
FLUO?
FLORINEF, and that's fludrocortisone is the generic name. It's a regular prescription. It's a yellow or white pill, and some people don't like fluoride. You know, they have symptoms from the Florinef, but most people can take it. And there's a place you can compound it in Canada if you can't tolerate the regular Florinef here. So what happens is these are the traditional medicine treatments for POTS, midodrine and Florinef.
What does Florinef do specifically?
It raises your blood pressure.
Okay.
And your blood volume, and your salt is retained, and your water is retained. So when somebody urinates a little bit too much, they're eating salt, but then it goes right out. They're drinking water, it goes right out. So that prevents the increase in urination and dehydration without having to give an IV every day of saline. And it is an adrenal hormone. So now we're crossing into adrenal insufficiency. So the patient does saliva and urine testing for cortisol. Do they have the symptoms of craving salt and sugar? Do they have, are they thin? Do they have weight loss? Do they have gaunt looking cheeks? There's a video on my website. It's lisanagi.com Office Video 2. And that video is like 5 minutes on the adrenal. And Office Video 3 is 5 minutes on postural tachycardia. So, you can watch it over and over again if you're a patient to remind yourself of the symptoms and the treatment and stay focused without having to do an appointment that costs money with any physician. That's, my angle. Now, if the person has adrenal insufficiency, there are 3 hormones that could be low. Aldosterone, which is Floridef. So we measure it standing at the laboratory. Then they sit down after 15 minutes. And then there's DHEA and cortisol. So you assess all of them. And then you fix that, you fix the POTS. And by the end of 5 days or maybe 10, they are dramatically improved. Everybody could get a lot better who has those 2 conditions. And then you move on to treating them for their chemical and electrical sensitivity. But you cannot put people in a sauna if they're going to faint, if they're going to pool. Now, the one thing I have to continue with is addiction to stimulants which vasoconstrict.
Can I just stop you? I didn't write fast enough. DHEA, cortisol, and what was the first hormone?
Aldosterone.
Oh, yeah. DEST. Okay.
Yeah.
So those 3 hormones are low.
What did you say?
Low when you have POTS. Those 3 are low when you have POTS.
No, when you have adrenal insufficiency, all 3 of them could be low and you need to assess them all and replace.
Okay.
But if you have POTS and you have low aldosterone or are pumping out aldosterone for years, eventually the adrenal gets tired and you develop adrenal insufficiency, in my mind, for 2 reasons. Direct from mold exposure, damaging the adrenal, or the pituitary where it's controlled, or from POTS that's not treated. And that constant stress and tachycardia of standing up with inadequate volume. And then your body just says, I can't produce aldosterone anymore. I'm burnt out. And now I'm not making cortisol either. So most of my patients do not have autoimmune adrenal insufficiency. That marker for autoimmune is that antibody is normal. Now, the most exciting part of what I have to say to the world is addiction and the relationship of these syndromes to then self-treating, self-medicating with drugs of addiction. And Tintera is very famous for publishing this, in the 80s or 70s, that low cortisol, low adrenal function is associated with alcoholism. You crave sugar because cortisol makes sugar available. Then you can crave booze. So people who drink alcohol should be assessed for adrenal insufficiency. And the island here is everybody's a drunk. So I'm trying to, it's the most alcoholic place in the world. So, and I drink very rarely. Like I drink like once every month or 2, have tequila.
So you think mold is part of that cause?
Absolutely 100%. Yeah. And really you could be addicted to beer because you're gluten sensitive and you love beer and you take it away, they go into withdrawal and, you can prove other aspects of the addiction or the sensitivity to different alcohols, but that's different from what I'm talking about.
I guess there's never been a study, peer-reviewed placebo.
We're trying to do it now. I'm working on it. Yeah.
Seriously?
I'm trying to get the endocrinologist at Harvard and Children's to look at POTS and adrenal insufficiency with the doctors at the hospital here and community services that deals with mental illness and addiction. And then I'll just finish, this thought that if they have POTS with a fast heartbeat, they don't have midodrine prescriptions, right? Because they weren't treated. So what do? They feel better with a Coca-Cola because it vasoconstricts. They feel better with a cup of coffee. And so in the literature, it says POTS should be treated with 2 strong cups of coffee in the morning. It's in the literature of standard treatment. So what about Adderall and cocaine? They also will treat it. So you have these kids driven towards drugs of addiction without knowing that they even have POTS. And then the very interesting literature, which is kind of confusing, is heroin. People who have low adrenal function feel normal with narcotics. They feel good and normal. So you can take somebody who's on Percocet or heroin, study their adrenal function for $100 with saliva testing at Quest, or, Sinesco is who I use that takes Medicare. And then give them hydrocortisone or Cortef or cortisol and they will be able to go off of heroin. So all the other stuff that we could talk about in terms of blood flow to the brain and blah, blah, blah is important. But this to me is the big rampant problem in the country, where people can say we're desperate, that we've got problems with addiction. We've got problems with long hauler COVID. It's overlapping in those patients who are already predisposed to low adrenal function. They might need steroids earlier in COVID. If we screened everybody and you knew you had low adrenal function, as soon as you get COVID, you would be more inclined to need dexamethasone, which is a steroid. So these patients will do poorly in the face of viral infection, because people with Addison's can't handle infection. They can't handle the stress. They die. Okay, so the last thing I want to cover is reading. A totally different subject, but when I got sick, I couldn't read for 3 years.
Wow.
So I could see the sentence on the page. It would jiggle around a little bit, and my eyes wouldn't be able to follow in a rhythmic way from left to right, left to right. And then if you ask me what I read, nothing went in. And most of my patients who were very sick have the same problem.
I was like that as a teenager.
Couldn't remember what you read? Well, you look so good now as an adult.
I will be 60 in 2 weeks, and I've never felt better. And, you know, I'm giving a talk, first webinar tonight to 100 people who work for an energy audit company. And I'm going to tell them my story. And, you know, falling on your head on your bike on the pavement doesn't help. Living in a moldy basement, applying pesticides, you know, 2,4-D. What else? Trauma, emotional trauma that everybody gets. Junk food, sugar, you name it, eh?
Yeah, but the sugar, you know, you may have had weak adrenals back then. And then as you got stronger, because you look good, like you've got full cheeks and you don't look hypoadrenal, but you should, after this talk, you know, everybody should know their adrenal function.
I lost all my hair because I have a wife who drags me outside. You know, it used to be my dad wanted to drag me to church. As a teenager, I didn't want to go to church, and I had a lot of hair back then, so I didn't lose it. But now we go cross country nearly every day, well, you know.
It means you probably have good, you know, male hormones. You have high DHT, you know, and so yeah. Balding can be a sign of strength.
Strength, oh yes, testosterone. Yeah. But you know, in my 20s, I was shoveling snow at 14 and playing hockey. My back started aching, and in my 20s, for years into my 30s, I was always at the chiropractors and the osteopath and what have you. And one day there was a naturopath who tested me, muscle testing, said, you know, sugar, milk, and gluten and alcohol and everything else. And I said, she's crazy. Well, she was right. I don't drink any alcohol anymore. Maybe 1 or 2, you know, a year just to taste it because it tastes great. But like many families, there's alcoholism in my family. My mother had pancreatic cancer. And I used to have hypoglycemia.
But that's adrenal.
The shakes,
so hypoglycemia occurs when you don't have enough cortisol to make sugar available, and the brain runs on sugar. So going back to learning disabilities. And also there's a very good article talking about adrenal and, you know, ADD. Boys with ADD, and then it says aggressive boys. But anyway, boys with ADD have low cortisol in the literature. I thought I discovered it. My ADD was gone. First pill, I could attend to everything. So not all ADD will be related to adrenal insufficiency, but that's an easy one to treat if they have it. And the aggressive boys would be those who are releasing adrenaline, epinephrine, because that part of the adrenal is working and they can't handle the production of the cortisol. Mm-hmm. So when they get irritable from low cortisol, they're combative. And the men who I often will treat a woman, the men who are mold exposed are often extremely belligerent, and they have no insight about what's going on. They're fighting with the wife. The wife is chemically sensitive and depressed, and the man is really unworkable sometimes. So you have to
heavy metals will do that too, right?
What will?
Heavy metals will make you aggressive also.
Yeah, I just don't see that the heavy metal issue is as predominant. I mean, I do, chelation challenge with 2 intravenous drips, DMPS and EDTA. And, you know, everybody's got the potential for high mercury or, you know, lead or cadmium, but it's not really as common. The mold issue is so common.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're in the moldy clothes and in the moldy house or have taken their moldy furniture with them, the car and everything, they'll never get better.
Okay, but tell me, for adrenal insufficiency, do you have natural treatments for that?
Well, you want to give them the best of everything. So Cortef is free and cheap. It's a prescription. Cortef.
CORTEF.
It's the hydrocortisone prescription.
Okay.
So I start with that to prove immediately, like after the first pill or two, that in 10, 20 minutes, they feel completely different. That is helpful for the patient and myself to see if they need it, because a normal person won't really have any symptoms from taking a little hydrocortisone, right? It doesn't make you feel great because it's so less strong than prednisone, right? It's like a hardly anything. But what was the question you just asked me? I wanted to
natural treatments. I was given, I think, some kind of from animal adrenal extract, I think.
Yeah. So what you do is, to the Cortef, if somebody has money and can afford a few supplements that are inexpensive, they can go to vitacost.com or another fancier site. They can get cordyceps, adrenal adaptogens like rhodiola and C and B5, pantothenic acid, and B complex. A B complex won't have enough B5, so you need to buy an extra B5 of 500 milligrams. And then adrenal bovine and like pure encapsulate. What?
I think I was taking that for a while.
Yeah, so you can do pure encapsulations, has ADR, like phyto ADR and bovine included ADR. But I feel that if a chiropractor or somebody else does the adrenal testing and then just gives you supplements, first of all, they're making money on the supplements, which is, I feel, the unethical part of our job, right? We really shouldn't be profiting from the sale of supplements. I have them in the office for convenience, you know, start this today, start this tomorrow. But then I want patients to buy everything on their own, and I don't want to be a salesman. Yeah. And then the other thing is, they need hydrocortisone in combination. So if the chiropractor just gives herbals and supplements, and then the patient gets a bad infection and dies, or has low blood pressure and hits their head, or is depressed and commits suicide, they're somewhat liable because they didn't refer to an endocrinologist who might not treat, but at least it's a legal referral, or an integrative doctor specializing in adrenal replacement, or an environmental physician. And not everybody's trained in it. So you have to call and ask the staff, is the physician versed in the use of hydrocortisone? And I do an ACTH stimulation test. I just did it yesterday, which is the standard test for Addison's. And so the medical board can't criticize my assessment because I'm doing saliva and 24-hour urine. I use Rhine Labs for the 24-hour urine. And it measures aldosterone and all the hormones, including the cortisol. And so when you take, and then blood tests, which are including ACTH level in the morning and a cortisol level in the morning, which should be, I think, 15. So when people get tested, those blood tests are the least sensitive. The ACTH stim test is the gold standard, and the saliva is the most sensitive. And then you put it together, and I usually treat on the second day, give a sample of Cortef for a couple of pills, touch base and see how the patient's doing. And if they feel they can think, their ADD is gone, then you know they're going to need it. And then you can add the adaptogens right after. Go ahead.
So have you had a lot of kids who had low grades in school and then the grades went up after treatment?
Well, the thing is, I don't really get a lot of referrals here from the pediatricians. So I've seen some kids, but I see them usually older as teenagers when they're a mess. What?
College students? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that people usually take about 10 years to call me after the first call. Family members, you know, I got a call yesterday from somebody 2 years after. And a lot of times, it says my computer's going to turn off. I got to just hit buttons. Hold on one second. I forget exactly. Oh, I did it. Okay. I didn't want the computer screen to go blank. But, you know, every person has different triggers to their learning disability. And so you really have to take a history and talk to them and ask if they have a musty basement. So if they have a musty basement or their clothes smell moldy or they reek of Tide and I want to say traditional detergent, scented detergent, and dryer sheets, that tells me they're unaware that the chemicals in their clothing could be making them spaced out. They could be chemically sensitive. They're walking around in a cloud of scent or a cloud of mold. And if I give them fresh clothing and, a shower and some fresh clothing, and this is the most exciting part. If you put them in a clean environment called an Oasis bedroom with a charcoal air filter, glass bottled water, organic food on a rotation of every 4 days, so you don't have chicken every day, and then you watch them unmask to chemicals. And by day 4, they can smell their old moldy clothes and they'll touch them to put like the socks on and put their hand in a bag. And they will get itching and rash and redness on their hand. They'll feel maybe like throwing up.
Wow.
And they'll get POTS. They'll feel sick as can be. So there's no going back to those clothes because they don't even need to spend any money to test the clothing, right? They know the clothing's made him sick. And then they feel good in their Oasis bedroom with a tile floor, I didn't mention. I see you have tile right there. Very good.
Well, it's funny because it's my sister-in-law, she gives every time, she gave us an electric toothbrush and my wife got a headache. She said, no, I can't use that. And she said, yeah, it's on your mind. And Andre's only saying that, yeah, I can smell it too, because he loves you, but I can smell it.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is I change all my products and I have them in the office so they can pick them up and start using Weleda toothpaste. It has a pink, it has a little bit of a scent, but not bad. So I switched all the products. And do you know all of this about chemical sensitivity or no?
Yeah. Since the early 90s,
Okay.
Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation had a chemist, Virginia Solares, who, bless her soul, also passed away. 2 of her kids had MCS. She became the head scientist for indoor air quality at Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation.
Wow.
So she trained me. I trained people in a big box renovation center many years ago after she trained me. I'm going to have to go cook lunch, so we'll have to continue another time. But just tell me in closing, Dr. Ray often talked about capsaicin. How do you pronounce it in English?
Capsaicin.
Capsaicin
from
chili peppers. I read an article in the paper yesterday about chili peppers. People have more longevity. What does it do to the body, that heat?
Well, the thing is, I'm not really a capsaicin expert. I just know that, it has some relationship to neurologic function, maybe substance P, and pain. And so if you use the allergy testing called provocation and neutralization at an environmental physician's office, we do histamine, we test serotonin, and then we test capsaicin. And you give the capsaicin shot to the patient to take home, especially if they have pain syndromes. And it's supposed to neutralize their reaction to maybe things that are modulating your pain response. And he felt that was an important addition in the last years of his life to patients in the clinic.
So it's an anti-inflammatory substance?
Yeah, but I'm not a good person to ask. I'd have to go research more about, what capsaicin does, but we obviously roll on capsaicin to a painful area topically. And that's one of the treatments for people with chronic pain. And the shot is sort of the luxurious model version of, you don't have to roll it on. And if you touch what you roll on to your eyes, it's not good, right? Because you'd have hot chili pepper stuff in your eye. So it's a little bit, you got to be careful to wash your hands after you use it.
Yeah.
But that's what that's how I learned about capsaicin, is that it's one of the allergy shots we do at the beginning.
Yeah. Last thing, I just ordered the curcumine oil that the internist Jacob Teitelbaum recommended in the talk with Anne-Louise Gittleman. He's finding it's one of the, also with the precursors of, what's it called again? I'm taking also.
Well, curcuma is very good as an anti-inflammatory.
Have you heard of this product, Immunocow?
No.
A friend of mine is maybe the worst electrosensitivity case in Quebec. He'd get bloodshot eyes, and his nose bleeding and all that. And Immunocow, developed by McGill University 25 years ago or so, is also given to patients with with AIDS and cancer, and Olympic athletes, high-level athletes to recover. It's what's the term? It's a precursor of.
What's the main constituent active ingredient?
It's just whey powder. It's a whey protein isolate. So it's
a lot of, you said whey, right?
Yeah. What's that? The master oxidant again.
Say that again.
The master oxidant in the body is.
Wait, are you talking about ALA, glutathione, vitamin C?
Glutathione precursor. That's what it is. Yeah. So he took this, and it really helped him with his electrosensitivity, besides reducing his exposure, of course. And if you work out, you build up your muscles also with this stuff. It's really good. I take it before and after tennis.
There's glycine, glutamine, and cysteine are the 3 amino acids that are precursors to glutathione. So it probably has those amino acids in it. And glutathione can be ingested orally, but best is intravenous if you're really sick. And some of us have a genetic defect with absent GSTM1 or GSPT1 or 2 or whatever. So if you look on 23andMe or other genetic testing, then those patients who don't produce glutathione well should have it every day. And we didn't really discuss some of the treatments in electrosensitivity, but we can always do that at another time.
We'll do another half hour next time. Yeah, but I did see that a lot of people with chemical and electrical sensitivities have enzyme deficiencies also.
But also the cortisol being low, sometimes that you can tolerate chemicals and electricity much better. So if I'm around 15 appliances and I'm sitting on a biomat and, who knows, I'll turn some things off if I feel symptomatic, or take my Midodrine, but I'll take the hydrocortisone, and it helps me, for 4 hours. So it's important to figure out which things are low in each individual person or abnormal. And then, 5 or 10 treatments in that direction. You can't take every supplement, you go crazy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, for now, thank you very much. I'll ask people to go and see your website, Lisa Nagy, Nagy.com. And I'll get back to you soon. We'll do this again.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lisa. Take good care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.